Welcome to Capital Catch Up, the podcast where we break down the latest moves coming out of Washington. I'm Victor.
And I'm Lainey. Today we're diving into a slate of bills and appropriations that have landed on the floor, from veterans, compensation to rail safety, disaster relief, and even how courts monitor cases. We'll explain what each proposal does, why it matters, and how it could affect everyday Americans.
Let's start with the veterans compensation package that's showing up in both chambers. In the Senate, we have Senate Bill 4487, the Veterans Compensation Cost of Living Adjustment Act of 2026. In the House, there's House Resolution 8552, a companion measure introduced by Representatives Luttrell and McGarvey. Both bills are bipartisan and aim to tie the rates of disability compensation and dependency and indemnity compensation to the cost of living adjustment that Social Security receives.
The mechanics are straightforward. Each year, the Social Security Administration calculates a percentage increase based on inflation. These bills would require the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to apply that same percentage to veterans, disability payments, and survivor benefits, effective December 1, 2026. By linking the two, the legislation ensures that veterans' benefits keep pace with the rising cost of everyday items, housing, groceries, medical care.
Historically, veterans' compensation has been adjusted by separate legislation, sometimes lagging behind inflation. By using the Social Security formula, Congress is streamlining the process and reducing the need for separate annual votes. If enacted, veterans and their families would see a predictable boost each year, which could help with budgeting for things like prescription drugs and home repairs.
The same approach was taken last year for the 2025 adjustment embodied in Senate Bill 2392 and House Resolution 2138. Those earlier bills set the precedent, so the 2026 version is essentially a continuation, just updating the effective date to December 2026 and directing the VA to publish the new rates in the Federal Register.
Moving from veterans to freight rail, the American Tank Car Modernization Act of 2025, House Resolution 2515, targets safety and efficiency on our railroads. It creates a grant program that will provide up to $100 million in total, plus $10 million a year for a pilot sensor program to help railcar owners install telematics and sensor technology.
Those telematics act like a digital health monitor for each tank car. They give real-time data on location, temperature, pressure, and structural integrity. That visibility can prevent spills of hazardous materials and reduce the likelihood of accidents. The bill prioritizes new builds and cars undergoing certification or maintenance, which means the most vulnerable assets get upgraded first.
The legislation also mandates a 3-year report from the Secretary of Transportation on how the grant program is working. That reporting requirement is a common congressional tool to ensure accountability and to let lawmakers assess whether the technology is delivering the promised safety gains.
Speaking of safety, the Rotor Act, House Resolution 6222, focuses on aviation. It stands for Rotorcraft Operations Transparency and Oversight Reform. The core of the bill is a requirement that all aircraft be equipped with Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast In, or ADS-B In. That technology lets pilots see traffic around them, improving situational awareness.
The bill also tightens the rules around ADS-B Out, which is the transmission of an aircraft's position to air traffic control. Federal agencies would have to transmit ADS-B Out regularly and submit performance reports to the FAA and Congress. The Rotor Act sets a deadline for compliance and calls for a negotiated rulemaking committee to draft the specific regulations.
That kind of collaborative rulemaking is designed to bring industry expertise into the process, which can speed up adoption while still protecting safety. If passed, pilots, from commercial airlines to private rotorcraft, would have a more consistent picture of the skies, potentially reducing near-miss incidents.
Let's shift to disaster relief. 2 bills propose major changes to how the federal government funds disaster response. First, the Disaster Response Flexibility Act of 2025, House Resolution 3251, amends the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act to create an optional block grant program. States could choose a lump sum grant instead of receiving direct public assistance from FEMA.
The idea is to give states more discretion in how they allocate funds after a major disaster. Block grants can be used for a broader range of recovery activities, but they also come with reporting requirements to keep the federal government in the loop. Critics sometimes argue that block grants can reduce oversight, but supporters say they cut red tape and let local officials respond faster.
The second proposal is the Sovereign States Emergency Management Act, House Resolution 3347. This one goes further, actually proposing to abolish FEMA and replace it with a block grant system administered by the Treasury. Grants would be allocated using a formula that looks at population, historical disaster frequency, and economic need. States would have to submit emergency management plans and regular reports to the Secretary of the Treasury.
That's a dramatic shift. Historically, FEMA has been the central hub for federal disaster response since it was created in 1979. Moving those functions to the President and Treasury would fundamentally change the chain of command. Proponents argue it would streamline decision-making and give states more control, while opponents worry about losing the specialized expertise and coordination that FEMA provides.
Both bills reflect a broader trend in Congress to give states more flexibility, but they also raise questions about consistency and equity across the country. We'll have to watch how the committees handle the trade-offs between local autonomy and national standards.
On the topic of flexibility, the Airman Certificate Accessibility Act, House Resolution 2247, addresses a more niche but still important issue. It would let pilots present their certificates, including medical certificates, in either physical or digital form to FAA inspectors. The FAA would have to update its regulations by the end of 2028 to accommodate digital submissions.
That change could simplify the process for pilots, especially those who travel frequently or operate out of remote airports. It also aligns with broader government efforts to modernize record-keeping and reduce paperwork.
Turning to infrastructure funding, the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2027, House Resolution 8469, allocates $23.6 billion for construction projects across the services. The breakdown includes $2.1 billion for the Army, $5.5 billion for the Navy and Marine Corps, and $3.7 billion for the Air Force, plus funds for family housing and other facilities.
In the Congressional record from May 15, 2026, Representative Perry offered an amendment to increase funding for stellate ganglion blocks, a treatment for PTSD. That amendment sparked a debate with Representative Wasserman Schultz, who cautioned against pushing experimental treatments through the appropriations process. It's a good illustration of how even within a large appropriations bill, individual line items can become flashpoints.
Speaking of appropriations, the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2027, House Resolution 8845, provides $440 million for the International Trade Administration, $450 million for the Bureau of Industry and Security, $256.5 million for the Economic Development Administration, and significant funding for the Census Bureau, the Patent and Trademark Office, NIST, and NOAA. Those allocations support everything from trade enforcement to climate monitoring.
Those numbers may seem abstract, but they translate into real-world services, better market data for exporters, more robust weather forecasting, and the continued operation of the census, which determines congressional representation and federal funding formulas.
A few other bills deserve a quick look. The Impact Act 2.0, House Resolution 2122, targets the construction industry by authorizing $15 million over 3 years for low-emission cement, concrete, and asphalt technologies. States can receive reimbursements and incentives to use these greener materials in highway projects, which could reduce the carbon footprint of our roads.
The Cashless Bail Reporting Act, House Resolution 5625, requires the Attorney General to publish an annual list of jurisdictions that allow cashless bail for certain offenses. The goal is transparency, letting the public see where cash bail is not required, which can affect how low-income defendants experience the criminal justice system.
Complementing that, the Monitor Accountability Act, House Resolution 8365, sets limits on court monitor fees, caps the term of a monitor at 5 years, and requires public comment before appointments. It also mandates annual accounting reports and a transfer of the case to a new judge after 6 years. The bill aims to ensure that court monitors, who oversee compliance in complex litigation, operate with transparency and fairness.
Finally, the Keeping Violent Offenders Off Our Streets Act of 2025, House Resolution 6260, targets fraud in bail posting. It amends the United States Code to make it a crime to engage in fraudulent activity when posting monetary bail bonds, or immigration bail bonds. The measure passed the House on May 14, 2026, and seeks to protect the integrity of the bail system.
That's a lot of legislation, but the common thread is a focus on accountability, modernization, and ensuring that federal programs keep pace with economic realities, whether that's adjusting veterans, benefits, modernizing rail safety, or giving states more leeway in disaster response.
Before we wrap up, let's recap the key takeaways listeners should watch for. First, the Veterans, Cost of Living Adjustment Bills, Senate Bill 4487 and House Resolution 8552 are moving through committee and could provide a predictable boost to veteran benefits later this year. Second, the American Tank Car Modernization Act, House Resolution 2515, and the Rotor Act, House Resolution 6222, both propose technology upgrades that could improve safety on railroads and in the skies. Third, the disaster relief proposals, House Resolutions 3251 and 3347, represent a potential overhaul of FEMA's role, so any hearings on those will be worth following. Fourth, the appropriations bills, House Resolutions 8469 and 8845, contain earmarks and amendments that could affect everything from military housing to weather forecasting. And finally, the Transparency Measures in the Cashless Bail Reporting Act, Monitor Accountability Act, and Keeping Violent Offenders Off Our Streets Act signal a broader congressional push for clearer oversight in the justice system.
Keep an eye on committee reports, especially from the Veterans Affairs Committee, the Transportation Committee, and the Appropriations Subcommittees on Defense and Commerce. Those are the venues where the details get hammered out and where amendments can change the shape of each bill.
That's all for today's Capitol Catch-Up. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with more analysis of what's happening on Capitol Hill.
Stay informed, stay engaged, and have a great week.